When poverty pressed him to the dust, he swore that wealth was worth any price. But the day riches came, he realized the gods never give without taking. He became a billionaire overnight, but at what cost? The sun had not yet risen when Michael sat at the edge of his broken wooden bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of his one-room apartment in Enugu. The air inside was heavy with the sour smell of kerosene fumes and damp clothes that had refused to dry during the last rain. The room was dark except for a faint glow from the lantern his wife Grace had left burning through the night. Beside him, their son David lay curled on a thin mat. His breathing was shallow, his tiny ribs poking against his fragile chest. He coughed weakly, the sound cutting through Michael's heart like a sharp blade. Poverty had turned his once healthy little boy into a shadow of himself. Michael sighed deeply, running his hand over his rough, unshaven face. His body ached from another restless night. He had not eaten since the previous afternoon. The little food they managed to scrape together had been reserved for David. Grace stirred, her wrapper loosely tied around her slim body. Her face, though weary, still carried a calmness that baffled Michael. She sat up slowly and reached for their son, placing her palm on his forehead. "He's still running temperature," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Michael, this child needs milk, fruits, something better than just Gary water. If not, I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" Michael snapped, more out of frustration than anger. He stood up, pacing the room. "Do you think I don't know what my son needs? Do you think I don't want to give him more than this life?" Grace lowered her gaze, her lips trembling, but she said nothing. Instead, she began humming softly, a tune of worship that often irritated Michael in moments like this. She had a way of trusting God even when everything was falling apart, and though Michael admired her faith, it sometimes felt like an insult to his efforts as a man. Outside, a rooster crowed. Soon the compound would come alive with neighbors preparing for their day, women fetching water, children chasing one another, and men gossiping as they headed to their jobs. Jobs Michael had searched for endlessly, but never found. By the time he stepped outside to fetch water, two men sitting under the mango tree near the gate spotted him. They laughed as he passed. "Ah, see Michael," one said mockingly, "the man who has been looking for jobs since Obasanjo's regime. How far, billionaire?" The other burst into loud laughter, slapping his thigh. "Better marry your wife to a rich man so your son can eat." Their words stung, but Michael forced himself to ignore them. He tightened his grip on the rusty bucket in his hand and walked toward the well. His eyes burned, not from the sun, but from shame. Even Grace's relatives had mocked him openly. Only last week her elder brother had visited and, after seeing their living condition, hissed loudly, "You should have married a real man, Grace. This one cannot even feed himself. Talk less of a family." Michael had stood there, helpless, fists clenched, fighting the urge to hit the man. But what would that change? Poverty had stolen his dignity. Back in the room, he sat again beside his wife, staring at David's frail body. Tears threatened to fall, but he swallowed them. A man was not supposed to cry. Yet as he watched his son cough weakly in his mother's arms, one question echoed in his mind. Is this all life has to offer me? Must poverty squeeze the life out of me and my family until we all perish? The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over Enugu, turning the dusty streets into burning paths. Michael trudged along with his faded slippers, his shirt clinging to his sweaty back. He had just left another construction site where the foreman had told him bluntly, "No work today, no space tomorrow. If you want, come next week." It was the same answer everywhere: rejection, disappointment, and the long walk home with empty hands. As he dragged his feet past the entrance of Eastern Hills Hotel, he froze. A convoy of 3 sleek black SUVs with tinted windows rolled slowly into the compound. The vehicles glittered under the sun like moving treasure chests. Michael's heart skipped. From the second SUV, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a bata stepped out. His gold wristwatch sparkled as he adjusted his cap. His gait was slow but confident, the kind of walk only wealth could teach a man. Michael rubbed his eyes. Is that? No, it can't be. But it was. Chief Okoro. The same Okoro who, just 10 years ago, had been one of his closest friends. They had hawked pure water together in the scorching streets of Enugu. They had shared dreams of making it big, of changing their lives. But somewhere along the line, Okoro had vanished. Rumors had flown that he had traveled abroad. Others whispered that he had joined some powerful secret society. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. Okoro was now a billionaire. Michael's mouth went dry. The contrast was painful. He, still stuck in rags, sweating under the sun, while his friend had become a man of power and riches. Chief Okoro's eyes scanned lazily over the small crowd gathered at the hotel entrance, until they landed on Michael. For a moment, he squinted, then a smile spread across his lips. Michael, my brother! His voice boomed, rich and commanding. He spread his arms wide as though they were still the boys who used to share a plate of rice by the roadside. Michael forced a smile and moved closer. Okoro, Chief, I almost didn't recognize you. Chief, K.E.? Okoro chuckled, pulling him into a strong embrace that smelled of expensive cologne. You're still the same humble Michael. Come, let's sit inside. Minutes later, Michael found himself sitting in the plush lobby of the hotel, air conditioning chilling his sweat-soaked shirt. A waiter placed a cold glass of juice in front of him. Michael stared at it awkwardly. It had been months since he had tasted anything that wasn't water or gari. Chief Okoro leaned back, adjusting his egbata. His eyes scanned Michael from head to toe. You still struggle, Abi? Michael lowered his head, shame washing over him. My brother. Life hard, things no balance. Okoro smiled knowingly. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. Do you know why you're still here, Michael? Do you know why you're still carrying poverty like a curse, while I sit here as a king? Michael's eyes lifted, confused. Luck? Okoro chuckled, shaking his head. No, my brother. Luck is a lie poor men tell themselves so they can sleep at night. Wealth, real wealth, comes with sacrifice. Michael frowned. Sacrifice? Yes. Okoro's eyes gleamed strangely. You think all these cars, these houses, the respect, the power, you think they came by hard work alone? No. This world is spiritual. If you want to rise, you must pay a price. The gods don't give without taking something in return. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his chest tightening. The word sacrifice sounded dangerous. What kind of price? He asked slowly. Okoro smiled, tapping the table with his finger. When you are ready, you'll know. For now, just remember, poverty is a choice. The day you decide you've suffered enough, you'll take the step. But Michael, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Are you man enough to pay the price? The question lingered like smoke in the air. Michael felt a chill run down his spine, though the air conditioning was freezing already. He forced a laugh, trying to shake off the tension. Okoro, you haven't changed. Always talking in riddles. But as Chief Okoro's convoy drove off, leaving Michael standing alone at the hotel gates, his words burned in Michael's mind. Are you man enough to pay the price? That night, as David coughed violently in his sleep, and Grace wept silently in prayer. Michael stared into the darkness of the room. Chief's words echoed louder than his wife's hymns. For the first time, Michael began to wonder, what if wealth really was just a sacrifice away? The night was unusually still. No wind rustled the leaves, no dog barked. Not even the usual hum of distant generators filled the air. The silence pressed against Michael's chest like a heavy weight as he lay on his wooden bed, staring at the ceiling. Grace was asleep. David curled weakly in her arms, his breathing shallow. Michael's stomach growled from hunger, but his mind was louder than his belly. Chief Okoro's words echoed again and again. Poverty is a choice. The day you decide you've suffered enough, you'll take the step. But are you man enough to pay the price? Michael shut his eyes tight, but the voices wouldn't stop. He saw images in his mind, his son coughing blood, Grace begging neighbors for salt, his in-laws mocking him, the children in the compound laughing at David for being the poor man's son. Suddenly a thought came like a whisper. Go to him, tonight. Michael sat up slowly. His heart pounded as he looked at Grace, her face peaceful in sleep. He knew if he told her where he was going, she would stop him. She would pray and rebuke him. She would call it the devil's trap. But Michael was tired of faith that did not put food on the table. Quietly, he slipped on his slippers and crept out of the room. The night air was cool, the moon half hidden behind clouds. He walked quickly, his shadow stretching across the narrow path that led to the main road. By the time he reached Chief Okoro's mansion at the edge of town, it was almost midnight. The gates opened before he even knocked, as though someone had been expecting him. Two tall men in black ushered him in without a word. Inside, the compound glowed with lights from the mansion, but Michael noticed something strange. At the far end, beyond the swimming pool, there was a small path leading into the forest. Chief Okoro emerged from the house, dressed not in agbada, but in a simple black wrapper tied around his waist. His chest gleamed with strange markings drawn in white chalk. You came, Okoro said, his voice low but firm. Michael hesitated. Chief, I don't know why I'm here, but something pushed me. Okoro smiled knowingly. No one comes here by mistake. The gods call those who are ready. He gestured toward the forest path. Follow me. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of dry leaves under their feet. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until Michael could barely see. Then faintly at first he heard it. Drums. Slow, heavy, rhythmic beats that grew louder with every step. Soon they entered a clearing. At the center stood a small shrine, its mud walls painted with red and white symbols. A fire burned in a clay pot before it, smoke rising and twisting into the night sky. Around the fire, masked men dressed in raffia skirts moved in circles, chanting in a tongue Michael did not understand. Their voices rose and fell like waves crashing against rocks. Michael's legs trembled. He wanted to run, but something stronger than fear kept him rooted. Okoro placed a hand on his shoulder. Do not fear. Tonight you will be given a choice. Poverty forever, or wealth beyond your imagination. An old priest stepped out from the shadows, his body painted in ash, his eyes glowing strangely in the firelight. He looked at Michael as if he could see straight through his soul. Son of dust, the priest intoned, you have been summoned. Your cry has reached the ears of those who give power. Speak. Do you desire to remain as you are, mocked and hungry, or will you embrace the covenant of wealth? Michael's throat went dry. His heart pounded so hard he thought it would burst. He glanced at Okoro, whose face bore a calm smile. The chanting grew louder, the fire higher. The priest stretched his hand toward Michael. Choose now, eternal poverty or riches at a cost. Michael swallowed hard. What? What cost? The priest's lips curved into a chilling smile. His voice dropped, deep and final. Your firstborn. The words slammed into Michael's chest like a hammer. He staggered back, his knees weakening. The image of David, coughing weakly in Grace's arms, flashed before his eyes. The priest raised his staff, the fire roaring higher as the masked men shouted in unison. Speak! Do you choose poverty or wealth? Michael's breath caught in his throat. His mind was a storm of fear, hunger, and desperation. He looked at Okoro, who whispered just loud enough for him to hear, Brother, don't be weak. You can always have more children, but poverty will kill you and the ones you love. Decide. Michael's lips trembled. His eyes shut tight, and in that moment, he felt his destiny trembling on the edge of a blade. The firelight crackled, throwing shadows of the masked dancers against the shrine walls. Their chanting rose louder, filling the night with a rhythm that seemed to grip Michael's very heartbeat. His chest tightened, his palms slick with sweat. The priest stood before him, his ash-covered body gleaming in the flames, eyes burning with an otherworldly glow. He slammed his staff against the ground, and the chanting stopped instantly. Silence fell, heavy, suffocating, absolute. Michael, son of dust, the priest's voice rumbled, deep and commanding. Do you accept the covenant of wealth? Speak now, for your words will bind you forever. Michael's lips trembled. He wanted to scream no. He wanted to run back into Grace's arms, to hold David close and protect him. But then he remembered David's hollow eyes, his frail chest struggling to rise with each breath. He remembered Grace begging neighbors for salt and kerosene. He remembered the laughter of men who mocked him for his failures. The priest's eyes pierced him like daggers. Choose! Michael's voice cracked as he whispered, I accept. The priest raised his staff high. The flames leapt upward, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Then hear this again. Your bloodline will pay. Your firstborn is the price. Michael staggered back, shaking his head violently. Chief Okoro stepped forward, his hand gripping Michael's shoulder firmly. His tone was calm, almost fatherly. Brother, don't be afraid. These are only rituals, mere words to scare the weak. Look at me. Did my firstborn die? Do I not live like a king? Don't think too much. This is only superstition. Think of what awaits you tomorrow. Cars, houses, honor, respect. Your boy will grow up healthy. Trust me. Michael's breath came in shallow gasps. Deep down, something told him this was no superstition, but his hunger, his shame, his desperation screamed louder than his conscience. The priest brought out a small clay bowl filled with dark liquid. From a goat's carcass beside the shrine, blood dripped into it slowly. He dipped a short knife into the bowl, then handed it to Michael. Seal it with your own blood, the priest commanded. Michael's hands shook violently as he took the blade. The chanting began again, louder, wilder. The fire flared. The masked men stamped their feet in unison, shaking the night with their rhythm. He closed his eyes. He thought of David. It's just superstition. He will be fine. Nothing will happen. But I cannot let poverty kill us first. With a trembling breath, Michael dragged the knife across his palm. The sting was sharp, hot. Blood welled up instantly. He squeezed his fist, letting drops of his blood fall into the clay bowl. The priest lifted the bowl high, chanting words Michael could not understand. The covenant is sealed. By blood you are bound. Riches without end will flow to you, but your firstborn is already marked for the altar. Michael fell to his knees, his body trembling. He wanted to scream, but the words stuck in his throat. Chief Okoro leaned down, smiling. Welcome, my brother. Tonight you became a man. The drums thundered. The masked men roared. The fire twisted higher, as if spirits danced within its flames. Michael pressed his bleeding hand against his chest, whispering to himself, desperate to believe, it's only superstition. David will be fine. He will be fine. But deep in his soul, a cold chill whispered otherwise. Michael opened his eyes to the faint rays of morning light sneaking through the torn curtains of his room. For a moment, everything felt the same. The cracked ceiling, the rusty lantern on the stool, Grace humming softly as she bathed David in the corner. But then, his phone buzzed. It wasn't the usual missed call from creditors or empty bank notifications. This was different. Credit alert. 5 million naira deposited into your account. Michael sat up sharply, blinking to be sure. Before his shock could settle, another buzz followed. Credit alert, 12,500,000 naira. Credit alert, 30 million naira. Credit alert, 50 million naira. The phone vibrated non-stop, a flood of alerts filling the tiny room with their chime. Michael's hands shook so much he almost dropped it. His account, once empty, now overflowed with digits he had only seen in movies. "Michael, what is it?" Grace asked, alarmed at his pale face. He swallowed hard, trying to speak, but words refused to come. Instead, he laughed, loud, shaky laughter that startled both Grace and David. He stood staring at the buzzing phone as if it were a magical charm. Before he could answer, a loud honk blared outside. Michael rushed out barefoot and froze. Parked at the gate of the compound were two brand-new SUVs, engines purring. Men in crisp suits stepped out, carrying files. "Are you Mr. Michael Okafor?" one of them asked respectfully. Yes, I am," Michael stammered. "Congratulations, sir. You have just been awarded a multi-million naira contract with the Federal Ministry of Works. Documents are ready for signing. Vehicles have been provided for your movement." Michael's head spun. His neighbors gathered quickly, whispering, pointing. Only yesterday he was mocked for fetching water in a rusty bucket. Today, strangers in suits bowed before him. Within hours, the transformation snowballed. Calls came from companies offering him investments. A bank manager himself arrived, begging him to open a platinum account. By evening, Michael stood before a massive construction site in Enugu, where workers already laid the foundation of what would become his mansion. Architects showed him blueprints of a house so grand it looked like a palace. He touched the glossy paper, his eyes wide. This is mine?" "Yes, sir," the architect said, smiling. "All expenses covered. You'll move in within 3 months." That night, Michael sat inside his new SUV, the leather seats smooth under his palms. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. His torn shirt had been replaced with a designer suit, his slippers with polished Italian shoes. Grace sat quietly beside him, still too shocked to speak. David dozed weakly in her arms, unaware of the storm of riches that had just entered their lives. Neighbors who had once mocked now bowed deeply, shouting, "Odogwu! Big man! Our billionaire!" Michael smiled, his chest swelling with pride. For the first time in his life, he felt like a man, like a king. Yet, as the convoy of cars drove through the night, David coughed suddenly in his mother's arms. A small, weak cough that echoed louder in Michael's ears than all the cheers outside. For a brief second, his smile faltered. He remembered the priest's words, "Your firstborn is the price." But he shook his head quickly, forcing the thought away. "No, it's just superstition. My boy will be fine." The sound of money alerts had not stopped echoing from Michael's new iPhone. Friends who once mocked him were now flooding his compound, bowing, hailing, and calling him Odogwu billionaire. Champagne flowed, music blasted, and women in glittering dresses danced around the pool. Michael's face shone with pride as he raised a glass high, declaring, "From today, poverty is dead in my lineage." But somewhere far from the noise, in a quiet private hospital room, a different sound echoed, a weak, pitiful cry. Little David, his firstborn, tossed helplessly on the bed. His skin had turned pale, his breaths shallow, as if unseen hands were pressing life out of him. Grace knelt beside the child, tears staining her top, whispering prayers with trembling lips. "God, please don't take my son from me. Please, not my David." Doctors rushed in and out, baffled. One after another shook their heads. Medically, this doesn't make sense. His vitals collapse and then rise again, as if something beyond medicine is draining him. Grace clung to the doctor's coat, sobbing. "Please, do something. He's my only child. He must not die." But even as she begged, David's cry pierced the night, faint and fading. Back at the mansion, Michael danced to the rhythm of his guests' praises. He had no idea that with every toast to his wealth, his child's heartbeat slowed. When Grace tried calling him, his phone buzzed endlessly on the marble table, ignored, drowned by laughter and music. That night, while the city glittered with Michael's newfound wealth, Grace tossed restlessly on their massive bed. Sleep eventually dragged her into a realm where reality bent and truth wore shadows. She found herself standing in a vast, misty plain. The wind howled with voices, cries of children, soft but piercing, echoing like broken hymns. Her heart pounded. From the distance, a figure in white slowly walked toward her. The woman's face glowed with light, her eyes piercing, yet filled with sorrow. "Grace!" The voice rang like a bell, though her lips did not move. Grace trembled. "Who are you?" The woman stopped just a few steps away. "I am a messenger. I come with a warning. Your husband has taken what was not his to take. He has touched a covenant sealed with blood, and for it, your child must pay." Grace's knees gave way. She fell to the misty ground, weeping. "No, no, my son is innocent. He has done nothing." The woman's eyes glistened, as though she shared the pain. "The sickness you see is not ordinary. It is the hand of the covenant dragging your son away." Grace screamed, clutching her chest. "What must I do? How can I stop this?" The woman stepped closer, her hand brushing Grace's shoulder, filling her with both fire and fear. "Pray, cry out to the God who breaks covenants of darkness. Confront your husband, for silence will kill your child. But beware, Michael will deny it, for greed blinds the heart. Still, his conscience will trouble him. The truth will fight its way out." Suddenly the skies turned red. A loud wail filled the air, the wail of a child. Grace turned and saw David, her little boy, reaching out to her as hands made of shadows pulled him into the mist. She ran, screaming his name, but her feet sank into the ground like quicksand. The woman's voice echoed one last time. "Do not delay, Grace. Your son's life hangs in the balance of your husband's sin." Grace jolted awake with a scream, drenched in sweat. Her eyes darted around the dark bedroom. Beside her, Michael stirred irritably. "Grace, what is it again?" he muttered, annoyed. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her chest. "Michael, I saw it. A woman told me the truth. You traded David's life for all this wealth." Michael's heart skipped. The words pierced him like a dagger. For a moment his hands trembled and his breath caught. But pride and fear wrapped around him like armor. "Nonsense," he snapped, sitting up. "Grace, you worry too much. Dreams are dreams. Stop filling your head with foolishness. God has blessed me, that's all. But as Grace wept quietly into the night, Michael could not sleep. Her words echoed in his skull, colliding with the memory of the shrine, the blood oath, and Chief Okro's sinister smile. The mansion felt colder than ever. The laughter of wealth could not drown the whisper of guilt. And deep down, he knew Grace's dream was not a lie. Grace's world was crumbling. Each passing night, David's breathing grew shallower, his eyes dimmer, his laughter gone. The doctors had no answers, and medicine was failing. But Grace knew deep inside her heart that this was no ordinary sickness. The dream of the woman in white echoed in her spirit like thunder. Your husband traded the child's life for riches. Tears burned her cheeks as she knelt beside his bed, her Bible spread open before her. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, she wept, if my husband has erred, have mercy on us. Let not the blood of my innocent child be taken. Lord, fight for me. She moved from church to church, seeking counsel. Prophets and pastors spoke with one voice. Woman, your child is under a covenant. Your husband has tied his destiny to wealth, bought with sacrifice. The firstborn is the price. Grace's knees trembled, but her spirit rose in fire. She declared, no covenant of darkness will take my child. My God is greater than their gods. Night after night, Grace waged war in prayer. She turned her bedroom and hospital room into a battlefield, her Bible in one hand, her child's photograph in the other. She fasted till her lips cracked, calling on God for mercy. She whispered prayers over David as he slept, anointing his forehead with oil. Meanwhile, Michael was restless. He lay in his king-sized bed, surrounded by wealth yet tormented by guilt. The cars in his garage and the millions in his account suddenly looked like curses, not blessings, but pride chained his tongue. How could he confess to Grace that the whispers of the prophets were true? Sometimes, in the silence of night, Michael would hear his son crying faintly from the hospital bed and shiver. Each cry sounded like judgment on his soul. Grace pressed harder, begged Michael to undo whatever he might have done. Even it was hard for her to believe. She gathered intercessors, old women who knew how to groan in the spirit. They would circle David's hospital bed, clapping their hands and declaring, every covenant of darkness, break in Jesus' name. The hospital became a battleground, doctors shaking their heads in confusion, Grace pressing her faith against an ancient covenant, and Michael caught between fear and denial. It was no longer about poverty or wealth. It was about life or death, light against darkness, faith against fear. And Grace knew one thing: she would not surrender her son without a fight. The morning sun rose like a golden crown over the city, but in Michael's house a heavy silence floated in the air. Grace had woken up unusually early, whispering prayers over her son as she prepared a large pot of rice for his 7th birthday, excited for his recuperation. David sat weakly on the bed, his eyes dim but smiling faintly as he whispered, Mama, will I get well this year? Grace swallowed her tears and forced a smile. You will, my son. This year, heaven will answer us. Meanwhile, Michael sat outside, surrounded by expensive cars and wealthy friends who had gathered to honor his son's birthday. To them, it was a celebration of life and wealth. To Michael, it was a cover for the dread eating his heart. For 7 weeks, the covenant had been hanging like a shadow over his child, and today the gods would come for their price. As the laughter of guests filled the compound, David suddenly clutched his chest. His eyes widened, his lips trembling. Mama, help me! I can't breathe! The world froze. Grace screamed, scooping him into her arms. Guests scattered, panicking. Michael stood rooted to the ground, his face pale. Deep inside, he knew. The priest's words thundered in his mind. On the seventh week, the bloodline debt must be paid. They rushed David to the hospital, sirens wailing through the streets. Grace prayed out loud, hitting her chest, tears soaking her face. Michael sat silently, his fingers shaking as he held his head. The doctors tried oxygen masks, injections, desperate measures, but within minutes, David's small body went limp. "I'm sorry, we lost him," the doctor whispered. Grace's cry pierced the heavens. She collapsed on the hospital floor, rolling in grief. Nurses rushed to hold her, but she fought them off, wailing like a wounded animal. Michael staggered to the wall, his world crumbling. Inside, guilt stabbed him 1,000 times, but he clenched his jaw and forced a mask of strength. "To the guests," he said coldly, "my son is gone. God gives, God takes." But deep in his soul, he heard the mocking laughter of unseen spirits. The price had been paid. Michael sat in his golden living room, the walls glistening with imported Italian marble. Yet his soul felt like a cracked clay pot. His cars gleamed outside, but in the silence of the night, the sound he heard wasn't engines. It was the faint cry of his dead son. At first, he thought it was grief, but soon the whispers grew louder. In his dreams, David stood barefoot in a white garment, asking, "Papa, why did you sell me?" Michael would wake drenched in sweat, screaming. Grace, broken by loss, had turned into a shadow of herself, silent, cold, and withdrawn. Neighbors whispered, "How can a billionaire lose his only son in such mystery?" "Na-wa-oh," rumors grew. Some said Michael's wealth smelled of blood. Business partners began to avoid him. The same money that brought him glory now carried a stench that drove peace far from his home. Grace could barely look at him. Her eyes, once filled with love, now pierced him with questions he could not answer. Michael drowned himself in alcohol, hosting parties to silence his torment. But every time the music stopped, the silence returned, and with it, the curse. His wealth had bought him mansions, but not rest, cars, but not joy, power, but not peace. At night, shadows danced on his walls, whispering his oath. His riches had turned to chains. Michael could no longer carry the weight. His soul was drowning under the blood-stained gold of his wealth. One night, as thunder rolled and rain beat against the mansion windows, he fell to his knees before Grace. His face was pale, his eyes swollen with sleeplessness. "Grace," his voice cracked like dry wood. "I did it. I gave David to the gods for this wealth." The words pierced the silence like a sword. Grace froze. Her lips trembled. Her hands clutched her chest. She sank to the floor, weeping so bitterly the marble echoed with her pain. "Michael, my husband, you killed our child?" Michael, trembling, stretched out his hands. "I thought I was buying us a future. I thought poverty would kill us faster. But now I see. I sold my soul, I sold my son, and I have nothing left." "You sacrificed our son for wealth? I begged you to undo it if you had a hand in it. You look me dead in the eye and call me crazy. Ha! Oh God, why me? Why my precious David?" Grace wailed uncontrollably. Michael wished the ground could open and swallow him. "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry and willing to give up everything," Michael said, trying to reach for her hands. "Don't you dare touch me. I curse you, Michael. I curse you for this incurable pain you've caused me," Grace heartbrokenly said, with tears-streaked face. Grace wept until her body shook. "She's too traumatized." She got up and moved out of the mansion. Michael became a shadow of himself after Grace left. He severally attempted taking his life, but all was futile. After much pleading from families and friends, and constantly dreaming of David asking her to forgive his father, Grace forgave him. That Sunday, she dragged Michael to a crusade ground at the city stadium. Thousands lifted their hands in worship as a preacher thundered, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus has come to give you life, and life more abundantly." Michael broke. He fell face first into the dusty ground, crying like a child. Grace knelt beside him, clutching his shirt as both screamed for mercy. The preacher pointed at them and declared, "What the devil has stolen, God can restore. This man will not die in guilt. The blood of Jesus speaks louder than the blood of sacrifices." As the crowd erupted, Michael felt chains shatter in his spirit. For the first time in months, he felt light. Grace held him close, both soaked in tears, whispering, "Maybe, maybe there is still hope." The billionaire who once bowed to idols was now at the feet of the cross, broken, humbled, and desperately clinging to redemption. In a moment of courage, Michael drags the blood-stained idols, charms, and covenant papers out of his secret room. With trembling hands, he pours fuel and strikes a match. Flames rise high into the night sky as demonic screams echo in his ears. Chief Okoro calls, warning, "You will regret this. The spirits don't release what belongs to them." But Michael cuts the line and watches everything turn to ash. Almost overnight, his accounts freeze, contracts vanish, and friends desert him. The mansion grows cold and empty. Yet for the first time in weeks, Michael sleeps without shadows chasing him. Grace, with renewed hope, holds his hands in prayer every night. Months later, she conceives again. Michael kneels beside her swollen belly, whispering, "I will not sacrifice you, my child. I will not repeat my sins. Wealth without peace is bondage." Though no longer the billionaire people once worshipped, Michael has gained something greater: freedom, faith, and a second chance at family. Months after the fire that consumed his dark past, Grace goes into labor. This time, Michael's heart beats not with fear, but with faith. He holds her hand, whispering prayers instead of making bargains. The cry of one baby fills the hospital room, then another. Twins. A double blessing. The doctors smile. It's rare, but it's a miracle. Michael breaks down in tears. Grace looks into his eyes, whispering, "What the devil tried to steal, God has restored, double." From that day, Michael refuses to hide his story. At crusades, on the streets, and even in business conferences, he testifies, "I had wealth but no peace. I touched blood money, and it nearly destroyed me. But God gave me mercy, and today I use my riches for His glory." He begins funding orphanages, widows, and poor families. What was once a curse becomes a channel of hope. People no longer speaks of Michael as the billionaire with a haunted mansion, but as the man who turned his pain into a blessing. And so the curse ends, not with riches, but with redemption. Far away, Chief Okoro still clings to his dark altar. When Michael burned his own occult objects, Okoro laughed. "Foolish boy, you will crawl back to me when poverty returns." But weeks turn to months and his own sacrifices begin to fail. Blood no longer answers him. Nights that once brought him whispers of power now echo with silence. One morning, the chief's mansion, once a palace of pride, sits in eerie stillness. His servants desert him as debts pile high. Businesses crumble overnight. He sacrifices more, but nothing works. Then the sickness comes. Strange sores, strange shadows. Doctors cannot explain. Native doctors cannot cure. And one dark night, neighbors hear his screams. "No, no, don't take me. I gave you everything. By morning, Chief Okoro is found lifeless on the cold marble floor, his eyes wide with terror. His wealth evaporates into nothing, his name remembered not as a man of honor, but as the one who sold his soul and lost everything. Years passed, but Michael's scars became his sermon. His voice, once trembling with regret, now carried the authority of a man who had seen the pit of darkness and returned alive. Quick wealth, he would say, standing before crowds of young men hungry for fortune and quick money, may cost your bloodline, but godly wealth builds generations. Out of his pain, he birthed purpose. He named a foundation after his late son, the David's Light Foundation, funding education, feeding the hungry, and rescuing widows and orphans. Each project was a memorial that David's death would never be forgotten, and that no shortcut to riches could ever replace the value of a righteous name. Grace, standing beside him with their twins, often looked at her husband and whispered, "From ashes, God truly raised beauty." Nigeria knew him not as Michael the greedy trader, but as Michael the voice, a man who turned tragedy into a torchlight for generations. And whenever he closed his speeches, silence would fall. Crowds would lean in, waiting for the words that pierced deeper than any sermon. I thought wealth was worth any price, until I buried my own child. If you must seek riches, seek the kind that heaven blesses, not the one hell demands. For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? In contrast, Michael's household rejoices with the laughter of twins, proving that peace with God outlives the fleeting riches of darkness.